suffering through a recession that was caused, at least in some part, by the housing bubble and the crash. This week on the Glenn Beck program, we are looking at the housing boom and bust with economist Thomas Sowell. We ask, where did all of this begin? Part one of our series, we look at the economics and the politics behind the boom. The U.S. housing crisis is far from over. The latest report from Realty Track shows that U.S. foreclosure filings hit a record 342,038 for the month of April. That's an increase of 32% from the year before. In California, foreclosures are up 42%, and Florida, 75%. Meanwhile, the S&P Case-Shiller National Home Price Index shows home prices have fallen 32.2% from their peak in 2006. Markets have tumbled, businesses have failed, growing unemployment threatens more foreclosures. The U.S. housing crisis has grown into the global financial crisis. But how did we get here? Thomas Sowell is a scholar in residence at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. He explains in his new book, The Housing Boom and Bust. This began years ago.
You can really go back to the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977, which was saying that the banks weren't lending enough money in their own immediate community or in all communities. But as time went on and as they began to get studies done indicating that blacks were turned down for loans more so than whites, then of course they're energized and immediately there's a crusade to clamp down on the banks, tell them who they should lend to, require them to keep records, the income and race, sex, everything of the people. And if the profile of those they lend to don't please the politicians, they're in trouble.
The price of housing skyrocketed in some parts of the country, but not others.
One of the crucial fallacies behind the housing boom and bust is the belief that there was a nationwide crisis of affordable housing. There was not. There were particular places, of which California is perhaps the worst example, of where the housing prices just shot up 3 times the national average.
But why?
Open space laws, environmental laws, historical preservation laws, farmland preservation, you name it, somebody was out there coming up with reasons why you couldn't build anything in vast parts of California. In order to deal with these very high, extremely high local prices, the politicians in Washington decided that they would have a national push for affordable housing. Well, the housing was more affordable at the time than it had been a decade earlier. So they set out to solve a problem that didn't exist, and they created a problem that did exist and still exists and may not be solved for years to come.
So who is really responsible?
There are a number of institutions that contributed to the housing boom and to the housing bust. The Federal Reserve is one of the most obvious since they set the interest rate.
The interest rate is so important for people buying houses. A % or two can mean the difference of thousands of dollars per year in mortgage payments, and the difference between buying a home or not buying a home.
When the interest rate is extremely low, that tempts many people to come in and buy houses that they really could not afford at a normal interest rate.
So how did Fannie and Freddie play into all of this?
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have a different role in that they are the ones who buy the mortgages from the banks or whoever else first makes the mortgage. And the rules that they set are the rules that the banks and the other lenders have to follow. Another set of people are the people in Wall Street who also buy these mortgages, great numbers of them, bundle them all together and issue bonds based on those mortgages. Everything depends upon how solid the mortgages are, how safe they are, how risky they are in this case.
Did the government force banks to make risky loans?
The federal agencies pushed the lenders and pushed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac into making more risky mortgages because they had this mantra of affordable housing and greater home ownership.
For a long time, Americans bought the line that the American dream is a big house filled with flat-screen TVs, the granite countertops. During the boom, we ran up our debt and put our money in houses. The government told us it was okay. In fact, they told us it was patriotic. Then came the bust. Now, what are they saying? That's tomorrow night. That'll be part 2 of our series with Thomas Sowell, The Housing Boom and Bust. By the way, it's a great book. Tonight, I'm going to